Good morning to you, afternoon to me.
Mo-
The formal reason for our getting together in this fine application is an article written by one Mr. Poulos. It was published to the New Atlantis Journal, originally given as a speech to some sort of space traveling society of some kind. Apparently changed a bit from that speech to the article. I'm not familiar with the original contents, so I can't really speak to how this may have changed. But I presume it's also there's perhaps some, don't know. I mean, the readers of the journal are, I suppose, in some way aligned with the Space Society.
We're all in space.
We're all in space.
We're all spaced out.
By now, I think it may well set in. So what's the premise of this? Like I was saying before you hit the record, I don't know how much of this article you've read, so I don't know how much I should summarize of it. Have you read the first few paragraphs?
Oh yes, the first few, I think a middle and the end. And
Okay.
at some point, it's been a while. It was enough to repel me and to encourage me to postpone further reading. But okay.
Wow.
And I haven't, and I've found so many pretexts that are in my mind that have come up to further postpone, and so you might fill in.
Certainly. Well, you'll be glad to know that this call isn't dedicated to converting you to its presuppositions or aims. I certainly haven't been, though I have read it at some length.
Mm-hmm.
And you could say the premise is, I mean, for as far
enchantment,
re-enchantment as you could say, as a means of a revival of seriousness, you might say, as getting the work done with respect to politics. That would be the charitable reading of it, instead of turning inward into these technocratic transhumanist fantasies. You turn all of that technology towards space travel, and that will perhaps solve problems down the line, and also redirect potentially destructive energies. That is the charitable reading of the article, as far as I'm concerned. I don't know whether it's the correct one. The person I was studying it with didn't quite agree that was the right reading. But at any rate, it's a charitable one, and there's enough to say about that.
So the author is all for traveling to Mars and for envisioning this new land as a promised land of sorts, where we can transcend. Perhaps it'll give us the opportunity, or at least the dream of this will help us sort of step out of our ordinary pettiness of mind and envision ourselves as capable of rising above ordinary politics, ordinary strife, perhaps.
I wouldn't say that, or at least that wasn't obvious to me from the article. It seems that it's, I mean, well, perhaps, right? Perhaps eventually, because it's described as a frontier for progress. So yes, there is the implication there that, yeah, perhaps eventually progress will do whatever it does, right? Which is ostensibly what you're describing. So I suppose in that sense, it is the expectation, according to the reasoning.
This has to do with perhaps more with the expectations, even the great expectations, to honor Charles Dickens, that will help us. The dreams that will help us rise out of ordinary political strife and pettiness. So we need dreams. Yes, we need visions, and this Mars business is This is what the sense that I got from the little I read of it. This Mars business or challenge will help us refuel the spirit of well, idealism, of this dream of we're going somewhere. It'll help us cultivate visions that transcend the earthly.
I think I would agree with that on my reading to this extent, that he seems to equivocate humanism with idealism. That seems to be the case from how he's describing.
What is idealism? Okay.
Yeah.
What is humanism? These are big terms, so I don't have a problem with
certainly
saying that they're the same, provided we unpack them and we explain what we mean by them.
Yes, well, we'll get to it hopefully as we move through either the notes or just reading bits from the article. Okay. So rising out of ordinary political concerns, I think part of the article's diagnosis, if you like, is that the political concerns of today are rather extraordinary and let's say, well, certainly misplaced, according to this gentleman, but also on rather that the game is on too great a scale, you could say. The concerns are extraordinary. Concerns are with, what to do with this tremendous power. What does it need to be used for? Do we need to, I don't know, what, be immortal, be perfectly just? These are things that come up.
What is this tremendous power?
Well, technology, and that
not
mainly,
impressed.
And that mainly that's mainly, I guess, digital surveillance, the digital economy, and of course the capacity for all of this production, the capacity to control the climate, to whatever, right? Whatever it's.
Okay. The latest clip of rubbish that popped up on my phone was that people are, some experts in whatever discipline, are concerned about the next solar something, if vapors, whatever, radiation,
shutting down all of the electricity,
shutting down everything. So there you go with all of your powers. So I'm not sure how impressive these powers are. Clearly, people have been using their toys to confuse others, through a kind of game of mirrors and mediation. So getting people used to seeing things in mirrors. And now, I mean, life is for most people, is a bit of a labyrinth, where you cannot escape. You're trying to escape and you need more medication to escape. And it takes you even further down the slippery road in Alice's Wonderland. Okay.
I presume what you're talking about, what people call media, let's say.
Information, the market of information. It is a market. There is a market of everything. Over, let's say, about 400 years ago, some fellow from Naples was tongue-in-cheek blaming Spinoza for conceiving of the world of human things, as grounded in mercantile principles. So speaking about politics as if you were speaking about a marketplace. This has become the standard in our times. So it is a self-fulfilled prophecy. The human world and the human being treated as merchandise. This is all very confusing for people. So that is what I'm talking about. It's not very impressive. And all toys notwithstanding. But okay, what does our author have to say? This Mars fellow.
What is his offer?
Yes. What does he want? What does he want to tell us?
I have my doubts. My friend, who is his friend, tells me that this gentleman is serious about sending rockets to Mars, and that it is for the reasons that he outlines in the article, which is what happens. I guess I'm scrolling through the article. I have my notes here, but I haven't made clear where in the article that is. I'm scrolling through it really quick. I guess, the Californian ideology, the progress is in trouble. It's turning on us.
Okay.
And
we need new horizons.
Yes, that's basically. That's my reading of it. Yeah, new horizons.
Okay. But this is not to be understood, in my understanding, this is not to be understood in merely physical terms.
That's right.
But mental. So
that's right.
New mental horizon, new vistas, new Microsoft Vista, new horizons.
Yes.
New dreams, extending the dream. But this is a sort of, this reminds us a bit of this so-called capitalist movement of, or colonial. The modern world needs to expand all the time. Moby Dick, it needs to expand so as not to implode and collapse upon itself.
Yes. And the reason why I sent this article to you to begin with, of course, all of this stuff about the rockets and whatnot is interesting enough, but the real crux of it is that he invokes poetry, which to a very different effect, according to a very different understanding of it, and with very clear practical implications. And so I thought that would be a nice, sort of a nice dark shadow for you to fence with. That's what I would like to offer you in this here Zoom.
Well, okay, I will ask you, what does he mean by poetry? But as part of my question, I will also suggest that it seems to me that for the most part, the notions of poetry that are cherished today are very much indebted to Romanticism. So,
yes,
19th century presentations and takes on poetry. So, well, poetry is about enchantment. Poetry is about Circe, the enchantress, the sorceress, and very often people feel themselves trapped in a world that is inimical to dreams. So, for instance, in my experience at the University of Cambridge in the United Kingdom, there were people involved precisely in that. That's the core of their work, was on re-enchantment. And this is a reification in effect. So we can conceive, for example, of God in the context of our need for sweetness and delight, and we need something pretty in our life. Mm-hmm. So we will construct, we will recycle images from the past. We will borrow from our sources images that will make our life livable.
Well, this could be a kind of a vulgar interpretation of our previous conversation, or no, the one before that with Chris, of the Don Quixote. This image of a man that brings this nice idea of, let's say, virtue into your life, that you can decorate your
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But we are there. The message is not compatible. There, we don't have people who are willfully and systematically picking images of the past to embellish their miserable lives. There we have someone who is escaping the miserable life, seeking, for him it might be a mirage, but he's actually onto something important. There we have, in Cervantes's terms, we have poetry, or he is pointing to the rediscovery of poetry as this natural, if you like, self-projection. The poet projects himself into muses, into images that reflect truth. They're not there to embellish our miserable, empty universe. They're there to point beyond it and to help us clearly see through it, not be trapped in that universe. In this other case that we have here, the images are used as consolation. They're palliatives. They embellish evil.
Yes, I see.
They're masks that allow us to do evil and pretend that we're good.
This is relevant to the article, I think. We can get to it, but yeah, what comes up in my mind in response to that is, well, the way the poetry is conceived of here in this article. But I don't know if you want to talk about that now or if you have more to say on that, because this seems to be, and this is the teaching also of this this gentleman that I was reading with, is that poetry is essentially ironic. That it's fairy tales, making up fairy tales to get at human concerns. So that would have kind of aspects of both, in that it is really trying to get at reality, let's say, but also not taking the images seriously in themselves.
Well, as you mean as fetishes, as idols?
If you, yes, in as much as according to this view, he would say that, Homer, Hesiod, they make these fetishes, the Greeks worship the fetishes, and meanwhile, clever people will say, like, oh, this thing is about this and it's about that, and this sort of East Coasty discourse around it, and that's kind of what that view amounts to. I would think. And it has a lot of explanatory power for as far as I'm familiar with poetry, ancient poetry. It has a lot of explanatory power. The mythoi can be read in this way.
The stories, yes.
Yeah, and you can look at the myth of as, this is how Strauss himself discusses it, actually in one of his lectures. I looked up recently because it was brought up in our conversation with Chris. That this is a kind of democratic self-justification of the philosopher, etc. It's a concealed speech, circumstances, interlocutors, the sort of typical Straussian emphasis on the form of the speeches, which is the dialogue. Seems to be a similar approach. What would you say?
What is meant here by poetry?
let's say, making images in speech, and according to this definition, ironically, indirect, discussing things indirectly through images. That's my impression of it. So in this article, he says, that the tickets will be written in prose, the tickets to Mars, but the brochures will be written in poetry. And that's self-explanatory for as far as it goes. It's so it's
you're selling smoke. I don't know.
I mean, that's the thing, like you're selling Mars, but you have to
Mars has nothing. Okay, but Mars has no. This is a gruesome notion of a conception of poetry. Again,
right.
If I understand this is as he means it. This is pretty much. This boils down to what I was just talking about. So poetry is embellishing. It's advertisement.
Oh, it doesn't always have to be that. I mean, it could be that, as it's been explained, also that, let's say, it's easier to explain something. For instance, the Anabasis, it's easy for Xenophon to make sense of things because they happened, and he can reflect on them and write things down a certain different way to bring out certain aspects of what he's got to teach about politics, about war, about philosophy. And that in this sort of controlled environment, it is easy to bring out the teachings through the story, rather than analyzing current events, for instance. It would be easier to write something that's paradigmatic and having no chance interfere with your understanding of things, so that the explanation is perfectly livid. Everything that appears in the speech functions as a part of the speech. It does not, there's no need to account for something unexpected or something that
the irrational.
Yeah, chance.
The irrational. Okay, let's say.
Yes. It's so having the discourse on a purely rational basis, then, if you like.
All right.
And that's what poetry and writing would allow for, according to this view.
Yes. Well, it abstracts.
Yes. That's right.
Clearly there is an abstracting function in all poetry. What we're abstracting out of is the totality. So you have a totality of experience, and out of that you draw elements to fashion a form that allows you to think without being distracted by fear and passion, that follows from this confused experience that you had. A confused experience that we could say is the result of a kind of fall, because you feel like as if you have fallen into this condition where everything around you is very confused. Our desire to come out of it, to make sense of things, to see the light in the dark, is telling us that we are not originally here. That we have the sense, kind of innate sense of inadequacy in the face of this confusion. So, okay, it is natural for the child to abstract out of it and create his little world. Now, what is he up to, and what is the end of this? So, what is the end of this abstraction on account of your authors?
I follow you. Well, I mean,
because this is the real crux of the
yeah.
matter.
So
What is the
yeah,
point of it?
yeah, right. What is the point? So indeed. So then we start talking about the good, right? I mean, presumably it would be the good. What is the good? It seems that according to this very political orientation, the good would be to get it, to go get them, to get what you want, get what you need, whatever. Take the spoils, secure the spoils.
Okay.
Hasten the booty.
Machiavellian attitude is that in the face of this confusion, you build a model. This model will empower you. It would allow you to cope with this world of confusion by building your little tower within it. And that tower is concrete. So your poetry becomes a kind of blueprint for the actual construction of a Tower of Babel, which is to say a tower in which you don't need any reference to false transcendence, and all transcendence is false in the respect that it's envisioned. So at that point, you might eventually even do away with the blueprint. It's conceivable. Once the tower is built, you won't need the blueprint anymore. The tower will have completely realized and fulfilled the blueprint.
Yeah, that's.
At this point, if you live in this world in which the machine is essentially replacing poetry, now you have some fellows who are saying, "Oh shit, this is very gruesome and bleak, so we want to recycle poetry as advertisement, perhaps, and for the brochures.
Make a new blueprint."
Well,
within
just to embellish this tower, even though we know quite well that there is no transcendent point of reference, that it's not pointing to something transcendent anymore, poetry. It is pointing to something that we're doing. It is confirming, embellishing, so therefore confirming the validity, the legitimacy of what we're doing. In other words, it is propaganda. Okay? What is propaganda? It is a kind of poetry in the service of what we're doing to convince everything that everything is all right. And as our friend Joseph Stalin would say, if nobody's complaining, that means everything is fine. So if people are fed this good, wholesome propaganda, then they won't doubt, they won't complain, and they won't ask questions about what we're doing. I mean, about the meaning, yes? They won't bring it into question. They will ask simply questions about how to best do what you're supposed to do. So technical questions.
Yeah, you'll get there on the back of the unicorn. It's poetry is relegated to, let's say, kind of to the rhetorical art, basically.
Subservient to what we're doing, really, to what we're doing.
Ultimately.
Now, this takes us to a very modern objection to what I have often argued and defended. The objection is that you have people who think, you have people who speak, who talk, and then you have people who actually do things. So doing becomes the goal. You first think, then you perhaps talk, or talk and think. And then what is crucial here is that it's all about doing it. It's not enough to talk, okay? And certainly not enough just to think in your head. This is the idea. And you must do things to change the world and to forge the future, come into a new world, and blah, blah, blah. So this is a very modern view, and it is of clear, there is a clear link to Machiavelli, in spite of the fact that most people who hold fast to this view would instinctively reject Machiavelli as being a cynical person, whereas we are idealistic because we want to go into a beautiful world where we have enchantment.
And we will talk about it beautifully. Huh?
Yes, of course. Yeah. Yes, of course.
He did not. That's why we think he's cynical.
Now, what is in very few terms, what is the fundamental alternative that is categorically and violently rejected by those who hold on to that view, if only tacitly, implicitly rejected? It is the view on account of which we can and we should ask about the goal of doing, the nature of that end. What is it for? We do things for, and there is a kind of natural end to our doing. Okay, we could project ideals. We could, come up with and say, well, today I'm going to go to school so I can earn more money. But I can go to work as a mechanic so I can earn more money. I can go practice my medical discipline so I can earn more money. And so every discipline becomes for money, but that's not a natural end of the discipline. The proper end of the discipline is not that. You can co-opt all the disciplines to serve a mercantile end, but that is not that's not helping us understand the proper end of that doing. So we do for the sake of something. And to understand that end, we need to talk. So speech is right there, and it is superior to the doing in the respect that it helps us come to terms with the proper end of the doing. And the end must be not of the order of doing. It will not really be of the order of speaking, although it will be intimately related to speaking, perhaps we'll find out. But it won't just be speaking, because it will be free from doing. And a speech that is free from doing is a speech that does not require my tongue, that does not require many of the things that are required to do things. So it is a speech, as we say, that is within the mind. It is a movement of the mind. And there we might find out that the end of doing is of the order of thinking, or something akin to thinking, and that this thinking turns out to be primary or even primordial with respect to doing. In other words, doing presupposes thinking. And speech allows us to see that before doing, even before doing, there is thinking. But thinking is discovered as an end that once discovered now entails a kind of an awakening to the beginning of doing. So here we have a reversal, an inversion, a revolution of the ordinary vulgar situation. Now this has been completely rejected, abandoned, in favor of what for the ancients would be a vulgar, if only on stilts, a vulgar attitude, a vulgar way of life that wants to instrumentalize thought, vulgarize speech, and turn it into propaganda, a means of empowerment. So doing becomes super important, and therefore the future becomes super important. As opposed to eternity, the eternity of the mind. The future becomes super important, preeminently important, because that's where this new doing seems to be going. And it's pushing ever further towards the creation of new horizons. And for that, it needs speech. It needs speech to project itself further. A little bit as this donkey, it has this carrot, and the carrot allows it to go further, and it's as it moves further, but it's the donkey who does it to himself now. Yeah, he holds his own carrot and he tells himself, okay, with this carrot that I'm projecting here, that I'm setting up for myself now, I will keep going in spite of the fact that I know that it's all fake, but I will go further and further into fakeness, as it were. And this way I will expand. It is a sort of, they have in economics, they have these pyramid schemes, and it's all fake. The bubble of the market of real estate is all fake. But if you just push it further, you might be able to gain something. And maybe there's going to be another bubble afterwards, and you create another bubble and another one. And you dive further and further, deeper and deeper into the fake, into the illusory.
These are all cartoons just waiting to happen.
So it's a fractal. There's again this image that we referred to in the past, the fractal universe.
Mm-hmm.
So the illusion, further diving deeper and deeper into illusion. This is the result of this abandonment of a classical, I will say it, a wholesome understanding of poetry. You reject that and you end up with garbage, makeup, limelight instead of genuine illuminating light. It's a flash, and you see this reflected in all spheres of life today. The speed, the violence of music, which is no longer music, it is noise. The violence of films, already the film is moving and it can be distracting. Okay, but as a theater on a screen, fine. But then everything is very violent. The images are, the camera work is all very violent. It breaks down in many new productions. The flow breaks down and it jumps. It's psychedelic. So, and the characterization of these, the people, the roles, these characters in these theatrical productions, they're disintegrating. They're centrifugal. Right? They're not centriped. They're not. They don't move towards the center. They're moving away from the center. And they could be going to Mars. And they could be going somewhere else. So will this travel to another planet serve any other purpose than to alienate us from the center of life?
Oh, let's get back to that. I mean, I wanted to joke before when you talked about a movement of the mind that is not quite thought, and I giggled to myself. Oh, Rousseau's sentiment of existence, something like that. I know that's not what you mean, but that's
no.
I guess.
Well, if you mean when I referred to something akin to thought?
Yes,
What I mean by what I mean by akin to thought is something suggesting that we don't really know what thought is. I mean, when we say thought,
Agreed.
it is usually my thought. It becomes a predicate of a self.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we say that I think, whereas it might turn out that it is not I who think thought, it is thought that thinks me. I am being thought. This I becomes a mask, a persona in the Latin term sense, the Roman sense of persona is a mask. So a representative, legal representative, um, but it is thought that thinks. This ego. This brings back into question, of course, so many times. Poor Descartes has been brought into question. Ego cogito. Well, cogito ergo sum. Well, first of all, it is not perhaps I who think. It is thought that thinks this I. And this I is not just sum, because only God says sum. It is somewhere. It is not just being.
Yes, one is not simply.
It's not simply, it's always somewhere. It exists.
And to just as a question for some to clarify, when you say that it's the thought that generates the ego, the things, do you mean by that you wouldn't know that there was an ego unless there was a thought? Or do you mean something else by that?
Well, there's no ego without a thought.
Yes. Is that what it means?
But I'm, the question is, who is knowing, however? Who is it that knows?
Well, typically, one would say that it's in modern terms, it's the subject, yeah.
Yeah, but this is a modern invention. The subject is subject matter in classical terms. Before these, the age of Descartes, it is never subject in those terms as me, ego. Nobody would have ever spoken prior to the age of Descartes of the ego in terms of a subject. There's complete reversal of terms. So subjectum, thrown in there, that's a material, and we still have it in the subject matter. Subject matter of this.
Yeah. So who is it that thinks? Well, by subject.
But you know what the theological answer to that is.
Well, yes, I do. And in terms of everyday experience, I suppose one would say, to begin with, the first round is, well, I'm here. I've got this sense of interiority that I'm walking around with. And I mean, but that too, I know is how would you have that if not, you would be aware with it, presumably through experience, but how is experience?
I will tell you.
Through the senses, and that's a mind. So what?
Yeah, I will tell you something about this.
Certainly.
They have these psychopaths who are involved in neurological research.
Yes.
And they're telling people how wonderful it will be to live one day with a chip in your brain. Now, these people, there's this Elon Musk, whatever. Okay. Now, and others, who are very much involved in this project of building androids and fusion of horizon between them. Now they're saying, we can continue being free within a context that determines us, our behavior. Now, we're not aware of that context, but we can do our thing, as it were. We can play and believe that we're free, but in reality, we're not. We're the playthings of a system. So why not? This system will guarantee our freedom, will be the guarantor of our freedom, of our game, of our plays.
Because it's originated in the arts.
Oh, but it's autonomous at that point. So
Yes,
it will be on its, it's a free floating
rational.
system. Oh man, it's a free floating system. It's a machine, and within this machine, you can play without getting in trouble, without danger. It eliminates danger. So
Hmm.
we can all play together, or each one in this little world, and everything works well, just as in a little bit as in Disneyland, shall we say, and without being aware that it's all within a machine that controls the whole.
This reminds me of some kind of movie,
Yes, well, it's where the
certain trilogy.
what's that?
Well, The Matrix, of course. I mean,
Ah, okay, yes. Well, so we're not aware of it. So this is what their answer would be, we have this sense that I am thinking, I have this, what you were describing just now, I believe. But then you can wake up and think, oh my goodness, well, maybe I am being lived, as a modern poet once said. I am being lived. Or as another one once said, a guy woke up in the morning and he realized he was dead. So all these years, I haven't been living. I thought I was living. I was being lived. I am a mask. And now you have the same situation with these robots. You have these probably, I think I bumped into one or two of these films with robots, artificial intelligence, where the robot is waking up and says, oh my goodness, I'm a robot. And this is a projection of the man who thinks, oh my goodness, I thought I was alive and I was just functioning. And this is what schools teach you, that we think that we're free, but actually our actions are determined by the neurological processes.
genes, fundamentally.
Yeah, blue or otherwise. But, um, it's mechanisms that are somehow projecting themselves into this dream, into this ego. So this ego is fake for modern science.
I was gonna, yeah, right, and that prompts the erection of this other fake thing, which is you can call it a matrix, you can call it a
Why
dream, you can
not?
call it a new cave, but
Yes,
it's
why
a cave
not?
that, yeah,
Given the discovery by modern science that human freedom is an illusion, why not replace the so-called natural context of that illusion with a machine that we make?
yeah,
We are
yeah.
perhaps then compelled by the forces of chaos. We're compelled to make this machine and to hide and dream within it. So again, deeper and deeper into um, illusion.
Which is in a sense held to be the most real because it's based on mathematics and
What else is there? I mean, what else is? It's the powers of chaos. Otherwise, so you move from the powers of chaos to um, further and further dimensions of illusion.
mathematics though aren't seen that way by not even by Darwinists, because of course how would you have all of this evidence for Darwinism if you didn't have the mathematics and all of the blueprints for the machines and the machines with their workings and the lenses and the tonsils and the
Yes.
tongs and the needles and whatnot.
Yes. What about them?
Well, so they're derived for a large part from mathematics, the
Yes.
theory, the physics, that's all backing each other up.
Well, okay.
Stardust, all of this, the age of the.
I don't know. I mean, there are in a very superficial level, there are people today who will still hang on to the discourse that mathematics is the language of the universe, that
Yeah,
it's
that's
proper to the universe. However, if you scratch the surface of this talk,
yeah. I mean,
on what grounds do they admit to be speaking.
This is the oddity about it that I wanted to bring forward. There is an insistence on mathematics,
Yes.
which justifies this evolutionist discourse, or the Darwinist discourse, or this mathematics that is held to be this absolute thing, which works itself out into this complete irrationality, which then prompts us to look to mathematics again and build all of this stuff. I think it's curious.
Mathematics as a justification?
Well, yes. Well, I suppose not really, but in as much as mathematics, for instance, is determined to is used to determine the age of the Earth or the age of the solar system,
Yes.
or
Yes.
and all of the cosmogony, all of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Now these are separate disciplines. There's
Okay.
but a lot of sciences do hold mathematics to be foundational, axiomatic,
okay.
as I say.
Okay, it allows clearly. Now, I think two things can be said here. One is that there's no such thing as mathematics simpliciter. There are various understandings of mathematics. Jacob Klein did a good job, I think, in highlighting in detail divergences in conceptions of number.
Yeah.
So we have the arithmos in Greek, which doesn't correspond to what we call number today. And yet people pretend that we've always been speaking about numbers in the same way. So we have a new modern symbolic logic, symbolic abstract understanding of number that is tied to a new conception of the ends of mathematics. So numbers on their own, they exist in vitro, in a bubble. Okay.
Well, prime numbers, yeah.
Hmm?
They
yes,
are
I mean,
these.
yes. I mean, you can create your you see, they have the Lord of the Ring. He creates his own language, and you can create your own language, and then say, okay, this is universal. And since everybody lives in a modern world, in a modern country, all countries adopt this, this universal and pattern. And through this patterns, you get used to seeing everything. And so you see, well, I take a sheet of paper, I cut a hole in it, a round circle, and I look and I tell everybody to do the same. And everybody's looking at everything through this circle. And everybody will be able to tell me, confirm my view that everything is circle. Everything is shaped as a circle. Everything is round in the world.
Yeah.
Because I look at it that way. So we're all so used to it. And if you go to Japan, if you go to China, if you go to India, everybody's playing the same game and looking at things through the same circle. We're all speaking a modern language of symbolic abstractions. But that's not a proof that this is universal. It simply is evidence that we have adopted universally, so to speak, the same model. Now,
yes,
is this model the language of the universe? Well, so to speak, because that's a language through which we look at the universe. But on what grounds will we be able to defend the belongingness, as it were, of this language to the universe itself? It does not belong to the universe. It is something, it is a model. In fact, okay, you could go Kantian and say that it belongs to the structure of the human thought, but that is BS again, because it does not belong to the classics. It was something strictly modern that now we project onto everyone, pretending that there has been, or again, we will play the game and say, well, we were meant to adopt this model by evolution. We have evolved to go in that direction. So the ancients had not yet evolved to our condition where now we see things through that circle, as it were.
you don't want to know the stuff I've seen claiming stuff like this, like evolution compels us to now do all of this to work together in these
Yes,
ways, do
yes.
these, but
Well,
it's
this
horrible.
has replaced God.
But
It has replaced God.
yeah, sure. But a kind of demiurgos rather than logos. And I suppose then mathematics would be a kind of Sophia, maybe. Um, I don't know. In
Becomes
that,
more and more mechanical. It becomes more and more mechanical, and
yeah.
we're working in the business of self-fulfilled prophecies.
Mhm.
You know, you see, like you cut the circle out, and you say, you see,
Yeah.
it's round. Ah, yeah,
Sure.
okay.
So I took too much for granted in talking about mathematics. I do appreciate that. But so how might one discover more about ancient mathematics and how it differs from the modern kind? Because I'm kind of familiar with Descartes, of course, and I know some of the things about his geometry and these things, or that they were novel, that they originated in this turn of thought. But I'm not awfully familiar with Platonic mathematics. I've read dialogues, but I just don't really understand what it's all about. I mean, in school they teach you the triangle like it's the Greek guy who made it up. So there's certainly a claim of continuity there. Of course, now modern education is very pre-Socratic. So I suppose that there's continuity in that respect. But so what of Socratic, Platonic, classic mathematics? Where might one best familiarize oneself with this?
I think that the best introduction that modern introduction, and modern in the sense that it's written
Commentary.
for modern people, it remains, I'm convinced, Jacob Klein. So we have his work on the origin of mathematics. He has the um, the um, the lectures and essays volume as well, that contains articles, chapters that are pertinent. One on Galileo, one I perhaps will just on modern science and related problems. So he is a very clear-minded and very down-to-earth man who is very helpful, I think. Jacob Klein.
Yeah, I'm familiar with the name. I know that Strauss was good friends with him.
Yes, he studied in Germany. He studied with Husserl. He also took a course with Heidegger, and,
Yeah.
and appreciated the fact that Heidegger had exposed aspects of Aristotle that had remained obscured throughout perhaps the centuries, but with the intent of destroying Aristotle. And he said, well, the Aristotle that Heidegger exposed made more sense to Klein than Heidegger himself. So that prompted Klein to take Aristotle ever more seriously. Now, that being said, as far as Platonic mathematics is concerned, Platonic can be understood, the term Platonic can be understood in a very general sense to mean common sense understanding of mathematics, not in the modern sense of common sense, which is a very special understanding of common sense. And on that commonsensical view, which is also a view to some extent shared by children, one is bigger than two, and two is bigger than three, and so forth. In other words, numbers are understood as moral entities, as first, second,
Yes, I see.
third, cardinal, ordinal distinction.
The one and the many. And the few in
The one is more important.
Yeah.
It is the first. This is a noble or aristocratic understanding of numbers, which is the first and proper understanding of numbers. Before we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the merchant's way of counting, we have the first, the second, the third. And we learn the first. So numbers have a moral status. And moral means that they're tied to the good. And so they are tied to what we would call metaphysics or the gods. They belong to the gods. Whereas today's numbers don't belong to anyone. And so since they're just there, we can just take them and grab them and do whatever we want with them.
Yeah, well, if you called them moral today, you would be taken to mean ethical, which briefly occurred to my mind, but then I thought, no, that's insane.
There is no such thing as mathematics that is just there for grabs. You just take it and you do what. This is a corrupt, derivative, parasitic view of numbers that is indebted to the merchant's attitudes. The merchant is using these numbers to quote.
Suppose if you're standing in line, then being number 500 is worse. Also.
Yes. Well, you know, and then the Bible the Gospels try to correct this whole trend by saying that the last will be the first, and so forth.
Yeah, the last of the. Yes, I see what you mean. That's honest stewardship.
Okay. Well, so much for mathematics. Mathematics is great. Platonic mathematics is common sense mathematics. So the big problem becomes the relation between the 1, the 2, and the 3. Once you understand the relation between these 3, the rest is just glosses, details. Yeah, you can.
So if in classical mathematics the numbers have a moral character, then it's not a separate thing from poetry. Then
Absolutely, or music for that matter, but derivatively, that's a function. But yes, so we have everything is numbers, says Aristotle about what the Platonists say. The Platonists say that everything is numbers. The world is made of numbers. There is an order, okay, but that is a classical or natural, I would say, even to the human being approach to mathematics. So you don't ever end up with mathematics conceived as this value-free symbolic abstraction that will allow you to build Auschwitz.
Yeah, well, out of this abstraction, you could also say that the world is made of numbers, and that this place Auschwitz is just another arrangement of numbers, I suppose.
Well, precisely, because it's not tied to a natural good.
Yeah. Yes, I see. It's not 1 as opposed to, I don't know, 660 something.
Well, it's that arithmos is a kind of rhythm. We have the word rhythm that derives etymologically from arithmos, which is, so there is a kind of order. It's related to order, a frequency. And so there's an order to things. And you're not going to just be able to take elements of order to do whatever the heck you want. that's disruption. That's you're ended up in, it's a loss. You're not destroying order, but you're ending up in a bubble. So the ancients did account for that possibility. The Bible accounts for it again when it tells us about Babel. We can end up in Sodom and Gomorrah. We can build up our castles and produce bubbles and hide in the bubbles. We can do that, but that doesn't modify the order of things. In other words, at some point, the castle will collapse, the bubble will pop, and so forth, and Sodom will burn to ashes. So at some point, we're going to be faced again with reality. This takes us back to that lady that I was telling you before this, just before we started our conversation.
Yeah.
This Canadian teacher of ethics courses for 20 years, and now she's faced, she was just refaced with this choice. You either accept to take this potion, this pseudo vaccine or whatever the state wants to impose, the globalist government wants to impose on you, or you are fired. And she says, well, look, this is my body. It's not good. I spoke to my colleagues. This potion is not it's not secure. It's not. We haven't received a confirmation that it's really good for you. So I don't want them to impose it upon my body. I am free. This is not ethical, she says. In the Kantian world is not right. So I quit my job. I have to. And then she explodes in tears at the end of the video. As a good philosopher will do, of course, after 20 years of teaching ethics. So what does this mean? It means that people are living in these bubbles. It could be a Kantian bubble, and then it pops. They realize, oops, the world doesn't live according to these principles. And now, as what happens all the time when your bubble pops, is that you're faced once again with a chaotic universe.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you something else. I mean, when the bubble pops, you get conservatives talking about Machiavelli again. It's something I wanted to bring up.
Well, so then they will tell you, so here, it hasn't really popped well enough. It hasn't popped for them. It hasn't popped for them because they're still in their bubble. Were it to pop for them, that would be the day when they would say, oh, shoot, Machiavelli doesn't work. Then but as long as their Machiavellian bubble is intact and is popping for other people, then they will be able to say, how do you face chaos, the chaotic universe? I give you the blueprint. The blueprint is there. You see and this is a little bit as those pastors, those ministers, those, if you like, who go to those preachers, who go to those missionaries, who go to people who have been faced with calamities, and they're in a dire condition. Their life has collapsed, and they're desperate, and the world seems to be a chaotic place to them, and there's no grace, there's no salvation, there's no help. And they come as an angel, and they tell them, open up. God is there. Jesus is there for you. Just open up, and you will receive the grace. And they convert. And they convert to whatever this person is telling them to convert to. And they find the grace, and they find my life has changed. Yes, of course. But that's, because you had treated yourself into this condition where the first person who comes along, who offers you this hope, and you cling on to that, and you say, wow. And then, yes, literally, your faith has saved you. Yes, your faith has saved you. You were such a wretched person, and your faith has saved you out of wretchedness. But this is not the end. This is not the end. It is only beginning. Now that
Yeah,
you're holding on to it.
I was listening to Tom Jones's late gospel album, and I noticed that a lot of the songs are, well, all of the songs are about, you know, the usual stuff, but also with respect to God, it's providence. In terms of, you know, if I give my soul to Jesus, will my wife love me again? You know, this sort of thing. It seems to operate on that level, right?
Well, this is the vulgar understanding of providence.
Sure.
Yeah.
But it is a commonly sought after kind of providence. Always has been, I would argue.
I was in a church last Sunday, and the preacher, he quoted, I believe, Mark, a passage where the paralytic, the paralytic is taken to Jesus, these crowds of people, and he's taken to the roof, through the roof, through a hole, and he's finally, and Jesus says, now stand up, you wreck of a wretched soul. Well, he's much more polite than that, but he stand up, pack up your belongings, and get the hell out of here. No, he says, go back home. And people say, oh, how can he be saved? He says he's saved. Yeah. God saves, not man. So then the preacher will gloss and suggest that, you see, we're all in this condition, and Jesus can save us, okay? A bit the situation that I just described, right? So your faith has saved you. In reality, we're not all in that situation. And what is more, that is just the first step.
Yeah.
Stand up. Yes, you can, as it were. And you can go home. Now, what does it mean to go home? Okay. Turn around. We're all, and again, we're all paralytics in the respect that we have thrown ourselves to the ground. We're now the only hand that we can see, the only hand that can help us, that we recognize, is the one that comes from the heavens. Now, if we conceive of this story in these terms, then the story would be telling us something else. We don't have to wait for the hand from heaven, which usually comes as a bolt of lightning to stop us in our crime. We can get a human hand, and the human hand can help us go back home.
And the home doesn't have to be a tabernacle. The blueprints could be for something else.
The home would be your original ground. Go back to what your proper end is going back home. So turn around and go, but don't go outward looking for the hand of God to save you. Turn around, and with the help of a human hand, you go back to the good, which is home. Now, what is that human hand? If the Gospels are written primarily for Romans, which is to say pagans, which is to say people who have been exposed to pagan writings, which are poetic, Virgil, etc. The human hand is the hand of poets. Human guidance is the guidance of poets. Poetry represents here, in its essence, human providence. The incarnation of divine providence among people. The poet is enough to save you. You don't need God's hand. You don't need to wait for that situation where you're so desperate you can receive as God's hand. There is an intermediary. That intermediary is a kind of poet. Now, if you want to say that Jesus is the king or the prince of poets, okay. But in this sense, not poet in the modern sense, obviously, who makes dreams for us to catapult us in the future, but precisely, you could say almost the opposite, in the respect that he is telling us go back home. He doesn't say, go back to your job and start building pyramids. He says, go back home. And home is a big question mark. It's the good. And to go back where you're coming from. Okay, so this takes us back to the role, I think, of poetry.
So it does. Well,
so much for Mars.
Right. Well, yeah. Well, indeed, according to this view, it's. I mean, this is how I see it. Also, it's a really. It seems like kind of a. I mean, is it a choice? I don't know. It presents itself that way to me, as following these people who want success, and this other intuition that is recently found expression in people I've encountered, such as yourself, who say, no, why not go home? Because success, I mean, it might be failure, but even if you get what you want, it's not going to be it. And I see a lot in that as well. I mean, certainly from personal experience, I've seen a lot in the tale you sketched of the cripple who looks for this helping hand, and then perhaps could discover a deeper dimension that might lead them home, wherever that is. However one reaches that, I can't say. But that's the crossroads, and I don't think people on either side of that could really talk to each other much, because I mean, I've been reading Thiel's essay, The Straussian Moment. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Thiel. He is, well, he's a man who writes, to put it xenophontically. He also writes.
I think he wrote an essay, a chapter in the Mastery of Nature volume, I think.
That's possible. Sounds like a place where he would pop up, certainly.
No, in which case I would have taken care of him in that double review of mine, which is much more than a review, of course.
Well, hey, you got that in common. You guys both can write esoterically. He does an all right job at it. Perhaps you do a better than all right job at it. We'll see when you've taken care of him. Did you recall any of it? Were you impressed? Were you stirred?
I was not impressed by any of the contributors.
I see.
Perhaps the first four, what was that? The preface. That was a little bit better. But and again, I'm not impressed by it. I don't recall anybody I've been impressed by among
Ever.
no recent writers. There's no recent writer I'm impressed with. I think some that I think are okay, but
Well,
not really impressed. No.
anyway, in this essay, the Straussian moment, he I mean, it's a lot to get into now, but he talks about the 30 Years War and how empire and church have disqualified each other, as it were. And I'd like to take that phrase and compare it to this crossroads between home and success. There is, on the one side, you can put away home as this is just talk. And at the end of that talk, you're going to die, asshole. And on the other side, you could look at them and say, like, same to you. I mean, what are you doing? For whom are you doing it? Your children? Why do you have them? Is it not better to as I know that there's a quotation in Herodotus when the Persian king speaks to, I don't know, some guy who says that, in so many words, it's for human beings it's better not to have been. And if that's so, then that's the only context in which you could want success also, right?
They will usually they will invoke, in a Kantian spirit, they will invoke the responsibility of our responsibility to contribute to a brighter future.
No. There's more mature responses than that.
Which, for example?
Well, so people would invoke, in my circle would say, get serious.
Is that better?
Oh yeah, it's better because it highlights the idea that looking to go home is self-destructive.
Yes, but okay,
you're missing out on the good.
On what's that?
That we're missing out on the good in this way.
What's that good? What is the good?
The good is success.
Yeah, but that's not more intelligent than saying, the future, responsibility for,
well, I don't
know,
it sounds too cute to me. Maybe that's the only difference.
What is success? What is success? What do you mean by success? Do you mean neo-hedonism? What do you mean by that?
Well, not the people I know. No, that's
so. What is the point? What is success?
Yeah, so I guess having a conservative society, a more or less stable society, where people are more or less happy, getting along, going along. Wow. I mean, I don't want to say it's anything impressive.
So isn't it better just to say that we're responsible for the building of a new, better society?
I don't know whether you would have to say that you were responsible.
Okay, you can.
I mean, you're compelled by reason, perhaps, and maybe that's responsibility.
Yes, well, that's what precisely this is the Kantian sense. You're compelled by reason.
All right. Well, yeah. In that case, all right. I'll drop my preoccupation with that phrasing because then that will be the same as what I'm proposing as an argument in the place of on behalf. Yeah. All right. So
they're simply they're recycling Kant.
Yeah.
Anybody who is moving towards the future society, and of course, I mean, they're not going to be just saying, you want to be successful in your and have a more money in your bank account, and that's going to justify your life, justify your living. They will say that this has to do with the improvement of our society.
Well, I can find another dimension in that.
What's that?
That's in concerning yourself with the beings and they're good perhaps, or just the beings. If knowledge and good are different, than just the beings is the philosophical life, and that's the only truly human life. And so being concerned with this, saying these things is
what is this
result
philosophical view? What is this for philosophical life for them?
In this view, it would be simply considering the beings and living
Well, I eat beings. Beans.
Yeah, the beings, nature.
Black beans. Black beans matter to me. For lunch, I'm having some black beans.
Oh, that sounds good.
But okay, but this is a kind of aesthetics, yeah, that I don't see going anywhere. If it has an ethical dimension, promoting the good society, that's Kant. If it stays within the realm of aesthetics, I contemplate these beings as
the virtuous life, etc.
You know, there's this what is his name? The author of mechanical reproduction in an age of, what is this?
Mechanical reproduction? How do we arrive there?
No, the author. The name slips my mind. German who. Jewish German author. Okay, he committed suicide, but envisioning modern man as a replica, was imitating the Greek gods insofar as he stands on clouds, pretends anyway to stand on clouds, and looks upon everyone else with detachment. Now, that seems to me to be a neo-Epicurean stance.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically how a lot of people view Straussians as kind of Epicureans. That's certainly the allegation of Kojève on the part of Strauss that it's yeah. I mean, you don't have to take it seriously, but it's something you could consider.
No, it's clear that most of these people who are appealing to Strauss are neo-Epicureans. There's no question about that.
Yeah, that's.
They are neo-Epicureans. They're pretending they have this facade, and they will actually tell you that it's a facade.
Yes. That's the strange position of Straussians, isn't it?
They're shameless neo-Epicurean. Why neo? The difference between the old Epicurean and neo is that the old Epicurean did not think it wise to mingle with ordinary mortals. These people are playing on two fronts, so they want to eat the cake and have it.
Have their tenure and
yes. Also, that's another dimension. Yes, of course, and still play that game and tell everyone that all of their pursuits are meaningless. But we should keep at it because that will allow me to pursue my Epicurean life, which is not quite Epicurean. Also, in terms of standards, intellectual standards. The old Epicureans were really devoted thoroughly to the contemplation of the movement of things. These people are not. It's more reified. They're more involved in books and discourse, intellectual discourse.
For the movement of things, how should I imagine that? The movement of things. What does that mean? Does that mean, is that what the gardens were for?
What the what?
What the gardens were for, the Epicurean gardens.
Well, there is kind of beauty to the movement of things.
Yeah.
You contemplate it, and you find beauty in this movement, and you find a kind of homoiosis. There's a fusion. You are with that movement, and you are a kind of manifestation of that movement.
Yes.
You're in syntony, in harmony with it.
I see. I suppose in these days, people need to get really quite high in order to get up to something like that. I don't know whether you would see stress in doing that, though, because they're too serious for that.
Yeah, they don't rise up to those heights. I think they're much more modest. They have lowered their standards, the Epicurean standards, I would say, in order to live, to compromise, to live as within the society, as integrated society, and in order also to have a say in the administration of that society. So they will try to influence policy.
Yeah, Machiavelli, right? These are his Straussians talking about this stuff.
Yes.
So,
and
make our move. Make our move.
Yeah. And yet, even there, they're not equals to Machiavelli, who was a lone wolf. He was a lone wolf. He did not work for any abominable institution. He was more poetic than these fellows, and definitely more diabolical. But diabolical in the sense of the character of Don Giovanni in Mozart. Okay.
Yes, he was not an academic. He was a political philosopher.
No, not an academic. Pretends to be one. Political philosopher. Okay. And he was not living safe. He was not safe.
Well, he died pretty safe, didn't he?
Okay. He was not. Yeah. He went through. He was always at arm's reach for of danger. He lived with danger. And these people are not, by any stretch of the imagination.
No. Well, with danger of being cancelled now and then, perhaps.
From the media, what do you call it? Social media. Okay.
Well, yeah, recently there was like a hit piece on Claremont, and they were kind of upset about it. And that's the full extent so far.
What happened?
Somebody just wrote a piece. I didn't read it. The headline was, whatever happened to Claremont.
Saw that title.
Huh?
Yes, I saw that title.
Yeah,
Somebody was attacking them.
It made some waves, and I mean, why would you read something like that? It's
okay. So, this is connecting to very journalistic diatribes. Trump connected because they supported Trump. Okay.
And people were digging at Straussians for being connected to the neocons and this thing. I mean that was already back then. I suppose fairly recent.
This is all a distraction. This is all a distraction from the real question is one of the nature of speech, and I repeat, the proper ascendance. So is there a hierarchy? Is there a telos kind of direction in the order of human life? Do we move from God to Babel, or do we move from our ordinary doings, pre-Babelic as it were, to the study of books, and through the books to the discovery of the nature of divinity? So there's something absolutely incompatible between these two paths. And I have heard people say, well, you see everything black and white. Well, go tell that to the prisoner in Auschwitz. There is something that is terribly incompatible with the good. If there is an abandonment, a rejection, a radical rejection of humanity, no amount of makeup will be able to convince me that it is that rejection and everything that follows from it is compatible with the good. Return to the roots. There has been a rejection. There has been a betrayal. Given that betrayal, there is an absolute incompatibility. You either go left or you go right. And I don't mean it in petty political terms, although it could have a reflection on that. Very simple. Or Manichaean. No. That distinction has been forced upon us. You accept the vile path, or you turn back home. And we've seen what the protagonist of the Gospels suggest we do.